In 2004, within a shadow-drenched mansion in Los Angeles, Marlon Brando pressed the record button with the heavy, labored breath of a man not long for this world. Instead of leaving behind words of love, he chose to leave 6 terrible curses for 6 monuments the world worshipped. He whispered, "The public sees them as gods, as top stars, but I have seen them rot and decay from the inside." What could turn an arrogant godfather so bitter? The trail leads back to 1955, when he was besieged by the arrogance of a music mogul, to 1967, when he faced a fake rose on a Hong Kong set, and to the bone-deep pain of realizing that the 1973 Oscar glory was nothing but a deceptive play. Amidst the agony of illness and extreme solitude, he leaned toward the recorder and delivered a final verdict that made Hollywood shudder. "I have nothing left to lose, and I will not hesitate to curse these detestable people." Chapter 1. Frank Sinatra, The Song of the Coward. In his final days, as Marlon Brando's massive frame lay motionless on a bed in his lonely villa, the only sound was not soothing music, but a low, furious rumble captured on tape. Brando was performing a final ritual, naming those he considered the stains of art. And the first name to ring out in the darkness, carrying all the contempt accumulated over half a century, was Frank Sinatra, the man the world revered as the Voice. For audiences of our generation, it is hard to imagine that the 2 biggest icons of the 50s could hate each other with such irreconcilable intensity. On one side was Marlon Brando, the bad boy breathing the wild air of method acting. On the other was Frank Sinatra, the symbol of glamour, power, and standards. But in Brando's eyes, Sinatra was no artist. This feud began on the set of Guys and Dolls in 1955. From day one, the air between them was thick with hostility. Sinatra, a proponent of the one-take style, absolutely hated waiting. He walked onto the set with the arrogance of a mob boss, expecting everything to revolve around him. Conversely, Brando was the embodiment of extreme meticulousness. He needed dozens of retakes, experimenting with a new emotion or a new furrow of the brow each time. Sinatra made no secret of his annoyance. He called Brando Mumbles, mocking an acting style he deemed garbage and a waste of time. Sinatra once declared bluntly to the crew, "Don't give me that method crap. Just tell me where to stand and let me say the lines." In response, Brando maintained a deadly silence. But it wasn't patience. It was the accumulation of a retaliatory storm in true Godfather style. The peak of this feud was the cheesecake incident that went down in cinematic history. In a crucial diner scene, Sinatra's character had to eat a large piece of cheesecake while conversing with Brando. Knowing full well that Sinatra loathed eating the same item repeatedly, Brando quietly executed his plan. Every time Sinatra delivered his lines perfectly and prepared to swallow the cake, Brando would deliberately forget his lines or pretend to stumble, forcing the director to yell, "Cut!" Sinatra had to eat a second piece, then a third, then a fourth. By the 8th take, Sinatra had truly snapped. He threw his fork onto the table, stood up abruptly, and screamed, "To hell with this mumbling bastard! Do you guys know what he's doing? He's killing me with this cake!" Sinatra stormed off immediately, leaving the crew bewildered, while Brando just sat there, smiling enigmatically with the cold eyes of a man who had just won a battle of wits. But Brando's hatred for Sinatra ran deeper than on-set clashes. In his final tapes, Brando confessed that he despised Sinatra for his phoniness. He viewed Sinatra as a coward hiding behind the power of the mafia to intimidate others. Brando wrote in his autobiography that whenever he looked into Sinatra's eyes, he didn't see an artist, only a kiss of the snake, a dark, filthy power devoid of self-respect. Brando could not forgive Sinatra for using his fame to manipulate Hollywood. For Brando, art had to be about devotion and real pain, not glamour backed by black gun barrels behind the scenes. He cursed Sinatra not just for personal conflict, but because he saw Sinatra as the man who turned Hollywood into a whorehouse of deceit. When Frank Sinatra passed away in 1998, Brando sent no condolences. In his mind, Sinatra's death was merely the end of a bad play. Even as he approached death's door himself, Brando whispered into the recorder, "He went first, but I hope wherever he is, he still has to eat those damn pieces of cheesecake for eternity." The feud with Sinatra was not just a funny anecdote about cake. It was proof of a genius's intolerance for what he considered mediocre and false. Chapter 2. Laurence Olivier, the soulless acting machine. Marlon Brando's recorder continued to spin. After a heavy breath, his deep, murky voice resonated, this time aiming straight across the ocean at a monument worshipped by the world. For our generation, Sir Laurence Olivier was not just an actor. He was the embodiment of elegance, the king of the British stage. But in Brando's eyes, that king was the greatest con artist in film history. Brando called Olivier a soulless acting machine. He didn't curse Olivier for his character, but for the falsehood Olivier propagated as an artistic standard. This vendetta didn't stem from an on-set argument, but from the clash of two worlds. Olivier represented the classical school, polished, technical, and based on externals. Conversely, Brando was the leader of method acting, diving into pain, roughness, and real emotion from within. To Brando, watching Olivier act was like looking at a carefully oiled mechanical doll. It moved perfectly, but its heart was empty. In his final tapes, Brando mocked Olivier's obsession with fake noses. Larry never walked on stage without a fake nose or a fake beard, Brando muttered with disdain. He spent 3 hours in front of a mirror putting on makeup, but not a single minute asking himself what his character was truly suffering from. Brando recalled watching Olivier play classic Shakespearean roles. While the world gave standing ovations for the booming voice and precise gestures of Sir Laurence, Brando saw only a chilling emptiness. He considered Olivier's acting style an insult to humanity. For Brando, acting had to be the exposure of the soul, a nakedness so raw it hurt. Olivier, in Brando's words, used technique to build a wall between himself and the audience. "He didn't act," Brando said on the tape, his voice trembling with anger. "He was just performing tricks. He was a skilled craftsman, not an artist. Larry was afraid of the truth. He was afraid to let the audience see that behind that grease paint was a real human being with real scars." This hatred deepened when Brando realized Hollywood was becoming enchanted by this technical style. He viewed Olivier as the man who created a generation of robotic actors, people who only knew how to memorize lines and adjust their tone to sound nice without ever daring to show their souls on frame. Brando cursed Olivier for turning art into luxury jewelry rather than a tool for human empathy. In Brando's imagination, Olivier was an arrogant ghost, always looking down from above at actors who worked by instinct like himself. He believed Olivier never truly tasted a single real tear in his entire glittering life. Brando's final curse for the British king was a bitter irony. "I hope in the next life, Larry is born as a mime, where he has no voice to show off, no fake nose to hide behind, and is forced to stand before a mirror to face his own empty soul." Chapter 3. Bert Reynolds, the nausea of art. Marlon Brando coughed lightly and pressed the record button again. This time, his voice lacked the scathing irony reserved for Olivier, carrying instead a heavy, spiteful tone. He mentioned a name that, according to him, was enough to pollute the atmosphere just by hearing it: Bert Reynolds. Surely many have not forgotten the handsome face, the masculine mustache, and the sly smile of Bert Reynolds on magazine covers or in the movie Deliverance. Reynolds was once the icon of American masculinity, the perfect successor to the box office king throne. But in Brando's eyes, Reynolds was neither a colleague nor a star. He called Reynolds an insult to every value I have dedicated my life to protecting. This hatred exploded most violently in the early 70s. At that time, Hollywood began looking for the new Marlon Brando, and Bert Reynolds, with a somewhat similar appearance and confident style, was quickly labeled the heir to the Godfather. It was this comparison that ignited a simmering rage within Brando. "He makes me want to vomit," Brando spoke straight into the recorder, sparing no feelings. This was not an exaggeration. In a famously leaked recording from the backstage of The Godfather, Brando threatened to quit the role immediately if the studio dared to cast Burt Reynolds as Michael Corleone. For Brando, sharing a frame with Reynolds was a degradation of artistic dignity. But why did Brando hate Reynolds so much? The answer lies in the opposition between truth and entertainment. Brando spent his life searching for the naked, painful truth of a character through method acting. Conversely, he saw in Reynolds a clown who only knew how to sell his looks cheaply, a man who liked to show off muscles and superficial masculinity to bribe the audience. This hatred worsened when Reynolds began publicly expressing admiration for Brando. For a man with a massive ego like Brando, admiration from someone he considered inferior was like a slap in the face. He viewed it as a blatant theft of glory. Brando never accepted that a guy who specialized in funny action movies would dare claim to be his student or successor. In his final tapes, Brando reserved a bitter curse for Reynolds. He cursed Reynolds' career to be forever trapped in mediocrity. "I hope history remembers him as a joke, a man who traded his soul for cheap posters," Brando whispered. He believed artists like Reynolds were the worms eating away at the foundation of Hollywood's true art. Reality proved that this feud never saw a day of reconciliation. Burt Reynolds later admitted he was devastated to learn his greatest idol hated him so much. But for Brando, that hatred wasn't personal malice. It was an extreme defense of what he called the cathedral of cinema. For Brando, this cathedral had no room for beaming smiles and purely entertaining movies. Chapter 4, Sophia Lauren, The Fake, Rose and the Nightmare in Hong Kong. As the ghosts of the past began to appear thickly in the dark mansion, Marlon Brando's recorder started spinning again at a slow, heavy pace. This time, the air seemed to grow more stifling as he mentioned a name evoking eternal beauty and the utmost luxury of European cinema: Sophia Lauren. To many, she is the embodiment of glamour, a brilliant rose from Naples who conquered the world with her talent and ethereal beauty. But in Brando's memory, that woman was merely a perfect but soulless wax statue, a person he believed spent her entire life playing a single role: the role of Sophia Lauren. This deep-seated feud brewed during the production of A Countess from Hong Kong in 1967. It was a special work, being the final film of legend Charlie Chaplin, and the only time two colossal egos of world cinema, Brando and Lauren, shared a frame. It should have been an artistic symphony, but in reality, it turned into a horrifying Cold War, where professionalism was minced by deep personal prejudices. Brando entered the set with the mindset of someone worshiping the naked truth. He demanded that sloppiness, weakness, and the rough corners of humanity be exposed. In contrast, Sophia Lauren appeared like a queen with meticulous preparation down to every strand of hair and fold of her dress. She was the perfect product of the European star system, where a magnificent appearance was part of the religion of art. This very contrast made Brando feel insulted. He saw phoniness in Lauren. To him, every movement, every glance of hers was mechanically calculated to maintain an image, rather than being led by true emotion. Tension escalated uncontrollably when Brando began using psychological attacks to break Lauren's perfect shell. He disdained her disciplined work ethic, considering it a sign of a lack of creativity. In rare interviews and later in his final tapes, Brando confessed that sitting next to Lauren was like sitting next to an expensive but cold piece of furniture. He couldn't stand an actor who cared more about which angle the light hit her face best than about how her character was suffering. The peak of the nightmare occurred during a close-up shot, when Brando suddenly stopped and hurled a direct insult regarding Lauren's personal hygiene right in front of the director and crew. It was a vicious blow aimed straight at the self-esteem of a woman who always prided herself on her flawless beauty. Lauren was stunned, followed by an explosion of rage. She accused Brando of being rude, an uneducated American boor who didn't know how to respect women. From that moment on, the set turned into a silent arena where the two main characters wouldn't look at each other unless the cameras were rolling. In the recording, Brando's voice dropped low, containing a contempt crystallized over decades. She never truly lived on screen. She was just presenting a museum of herself where everything is polished clean but lacks a single breath of real life. This was one of the two rare passages he dedicated to summarizing his co-star. This judgment showed that Brando's hatred lay not just in personal clashes, but in the conflict between two concepts of beauty. He cursed her career for making the audience believe cinema is about what is most glittering and flawless, rather than what is most truthful and painful. Brando's curse for the Italian rose carried the color of artistic oblivion. He believed that when the makeup faded and beauty withered with time, all that remained of Lauren would be a vast emptiness because she never dared to die for a role. He criticized her arrogance, viewing it as a wall separating her from the real world. To Brando, Lauren was the embodiment of an old Hollywood where people would rather embrace a magnificent lie than accept an ugly truth. To those who love Sophia Lauren, this might be an insult, but to Brando, it was the final confession of a man who spent his life peeling away the masks of existence. Chapter 5. Elizabeth Taylor, the Pampered Princess. After a few clicks of the tape mechanism, he let out a long sigh and mentioned a name that surely stirs the heart of anyone who lived through the golden age of cinema. Elizabeth Taylor. To the audience, she was the Queen of Smiles, the woman with the world's most seductive violet eyes, and the symbol of ultimate luxury. But to Brando, Elizabeth Taylor was a great disappointment, someone he considered Hollywood's child who never grew up. Brando's hatred, or rather his disdain, for Taylor did not stem from any loud quarrel. In fact, he viewed her with a critical eye because of how she was raised and grew up within the major studios. Unlike Brando, who had to struggle and taste all the bitterness of life to gain acting experience, Elizabeth Taylor was brought into the film world as a little girl. She was sheltered, pampered, and protected by studio bosses in a luxurious glass cage. This created an unbridgeable gap between them when they co-starred in Reflections in a Golden Eye in 1967. Throughout their time on set, Brando was constantly annoyed by Taylor's habits. He saw her as a little princess, always surrounded by servants. She cared about how bright the diamonds on her hand were, whether her dress was magnificent enough, or how her romantic scandals were being written up in the press. For someone who viewed acting as hard labor requiring maximum authenticity, like Brando, that lifestyle was ridiculous and meaningless. He often stood from afar, watching her surrounded by makeup artists and people catering to her every whim, and shook his head in weariness. Brando argued that Taylor was not a true actor in the proper sense of the word. He believed she was just playing around with cinema. In his eyes, she didn't act with her soul, but with her fame. Every time she stepped into the frame, she brought all the aura of an A-list star, completely overshadowing the character she was playing. Brando felt exhausted working with someone who, in his opinion, knew nothing of life's real pains, someone who never had to worry about tomorrow because a massive system was behind her handling everything. This conflict became starker when Brando noticed Taylor was often late or made unreasonable demands just to satisfy her ego. Once, he had to wait hours just for her to finish choosing a piece of jewelry she liked before shooting a scene. That was when Brando felt most clearly the hollowness of the celebrity world Taylor represented. He didn't hate her for being malicious, he just saw her as an overinflated Hollywood product, a person with a dazzling exterior but lacking the necessary life experiences inside to become a great artist. In the tape, Brando uttered a bitter sentence about his co-star. "She is essentially just an expensive toy of the studios, a person pampered by the world to the point of forgetting how to be a normal human being with emotions." This remark revealed Brando's deep disappointment. He didn't find in Taylor a colleague with whom he could share professional struggles, only a symbol of vanity trying to play a woman of depth. Furthermore, Brando despised how Taylor used her private life to maintain fame. Her noisy marriages, million-dollar jewelry, and luxurious trips were, in Brando's eyes, trivialities. He cursed her career, claiming she corrupted the audience's taste, making them believe a true star is someone who must have a flashy life rather than true talent. Brando believed that when beauty passed, Elizabeth Taylor would be left with nothing but memories of wealth because she never truly lived and sacrificed for art completely. The final curse Brando reserved for Taylor was a regret mixed with irony. He believed she was a victim of her own fame, someone locked in a golden cage who never knew the freedom of a true artist. To Brando, Taylor would forever be the princess who never grew up, living in a fantasy world the studios built for her, and the naked truth of life was something she could never touch. Ending the story of Elizabeth Taylor, Brando left a mournful sigh. To those who loved and admired the beauty of Liz Taylor, Brando's judgments might be shocking. But that was Marlon Brando, a man who never accepted anything fake or half-hearted. He looked through the glittering diamonds to see a sadness he believed was the hollowness of a legend. Elizabeth might own every gemstone on earth, but she never owned a single moment of real pain on screen, Brando muttered before speaking the final name. Chapter 6. Charlton Heston, The Curse of Stiffness. Marlon Brando brought a trembling hand to press the record button for the final tape. This was the last name on the list, a person Brando considered his greatest opponent, not because of fame, but because everything this person represented was completely contrary to him. That was Charlton Heston. He was an overly familiar name, the man who parted the Red Sea as Moses in the Ten Commandments, the valiant hero on the chariot in Ben-Hur. He had a voice that boomed like thunder and a majestic appearance that commanded respect. But to Brando, all that majesty was merely a walking log. Brando's hatred for Heston was an annoyance that spanned decades regarding how Heston approached the craft. Brando always believed acting meant revealing the truest, weakest, and roughest parts of a human being. Meanwhile, Charlton Heston always appeared with a solemn, rigid face and never-changing emotions. Brando often told friends that watching Heston act exhausted him because he saw the man always straining to be a hero. He saw in Heston a lack of flexibility, a style of acting that was display rather than living with the character. This difference became even starker when looking at their private lives. Brando was a man who fought for the rights of Native Americans and the poor, a free spirit who was sometimes a bit rebellious. Conversely, Charlton Heston was an icon of American conservatism, very rigid in his political views, and later became the president of the NRA. Brando couldn't stand that someone with such great influence as Heston would promote things he considered violent and obsolete. To Brando, Heston was not only stiff on screen, but stiff in his thinking and way of life. Whenever Heston was mentioned, Brando would purse his lips in sarcasm. He thought Heston just got lucky having a face suitable for great men or epic heroes, but essentially knew nothing of the artist's deep emotions. Brando once shared in a rare conversation that he felt sorry for audiences who considered Heston the standard of acting. He believed Heston's excessive seriousness unintentionally turned cinema into something dry and lacking the breath of real life. In this final recording, Brando seemed no longer to want to use harsh words like with Sinatra or Bert Reynolds, but instead adopted a weary and somewhat ironic tone. He mumbled about how Heston always stood straight as a utility pole, even when filming scenes requiring softness. Brando felt Heston had built a wall around himself, preventing him from ever touching the true emotional layers of humanity. There was a short line in the tape that best expressed Brando's disdain for this colleague. "Charlton Heston isn't an actor. He's a wooden statue erected to look imposing in front of a lens. That's all." This sentence seemed to summarize everything Brando thought about Heston. To him, Heston was the embodiment of an old-fashioned Hollywood, where one only needed to be handsome and solemn rather than agonizing over every role. Moreover, Brando cursed the way Heston always considered himself the guardian of traditional values. He found it ridiculous. Brando believed a true artist must always change, always know how to doubt oneself, and always seek the new, rather than sitting on a self-constructed throne judging the world. Brando thought Heston was too busy playing Moses or generals to remember how to be a normal human being, with faults and clumsy moments. Brando's final curse for Charlton Heston was the curse of oblivion. He believed that when the great epic films passed, people would only remember Heston as a memory of a bygone cinematic era, not as a teacher or an inspiration for the next generation. For Brando, an actor without a soul is like an empty shell. No matter how large or magnificent, it will eventually be worn down by time into dust. After the final name was revealed, Marlon Brando let out a long breath. He had said everything that needed to be said, judged everyone who needed judging. The recorder stopped with a dry click, leaving a vast silence in the dark room. Brando lay there amidst the ghosts of the past, feeling at peace for finally speaking the truth of his heart. To older audiences like us, Charlton Heston remains the great Moses, but through Brando's narrative, we see a different perspective, the view of a man who always worshipped absolute truth and hated all fake rigidity. When the clattering of the tape recorder stopped, it was also the moment the velvet curtain of Hollywood legends was pulled down in the starkest manner. 6 names, 6 bitter curses, but in essence, it was the heart's voice of a man who spent his life searching for truth. Marlon Brando didn't hate his colleagues solely for personal feuds. He hated the phoniness, the magnificent masks Hollywood used to deceive the audience. For us who spent our youth admiring Elizabeth Taylor or Charlton Heston, Brando's judgments might leave us stunned. But it is thanks to that harsh gaze that we realize behind the brilliant aura were flesh and blood human beings, possessing weaknesses and mistakes. Brando chose solitude on the hilltop to keep his soul unstained by vanity, and his curses remain the final legacy of an artist who never accepted half measures.